in RockstarSpect.
A city on the verge of greatness. A new type of city, based not on the man, but on the automobile. The car, the symbol of freedom and vitality. Where every man can own his own home, and have room to breathe and not be overlooked by his neighbors. A city where a man's home is his castle. A quarter acre of the dream made possible by victory. A city of opportunists. A city of dreams, where Hollywood will shape the thoughts and desires of the entire planet.
I had been hired to examine the connection between Hollywood and a company known as Rockstar. My colleagues had infiltrated the company in their own way, leaving me to find my own. My destination, the City of Angels, the year 1947. I knew that Rockstar, hailing from New York City, were not the sole creators of this city. It started with Team Bondi in Australia. Both have left their mark here. Team Bondi represent Hollywood itself, where cinematic dreams happen, and Rockstar are Broadway, where the magic is brought to life on screen. Theatres and film sets all over this place in L.A. It's difficult to separate them. My own connection lied in two men of cinematic history, one whose steps haunted these streets and another who still do. Caught between them in a limbo between past and future, between reality and fiction, I wanted to see if this L.A. noir could bring them to me now, in a way in which Los Angeles couldn't do anymore. Jake Jeets and Bud White. One a private detective working for himself, the other a detective for the LAPD. Both on the right side of the law, and both happy to bend it to their needs. The one thing these men had in common above all was LA. Bringing them back would be a challenge, maybe impossible. I would need to read the city as they did, like I was casting a spell on it. To get a feel for their movements, I would have to pick a place that had some meaning to both of them. For Jeets, it had to be Chinatown, the place that sucked all his hope into it, a vortex for all of his misfortune. 10 years ago, something tragic happened here to Jeets, a scar on the city's skin that never really healed. For Bud White, it is the Night Owl coffee shop, which in 6 years' time will be the scene to a crime of such tragedy and mystery that it will change his life. If I could find these two locations, Chinatown and the Night Owl coffee shop, by myself, without a map, I knew that I could bring them back. I just had to trust the city. The LA of 2012 has changed too much for me to be able to do this, but the LA of 1947 was just right. To drift, you need to make place liquid, to go with the flow, to turn streets into streams and freeways into rivers. LA is not a city to be walked, it's a city to be seen at speed. I couldn't step into Jeets or White's shoes, but I could step into the next best thing. It started with the water.
reservoirs, and we're supposed to be in the middle of a drought. He found out about it, and he was killed. There's a waterlogged drunk in the morgue. Involuntary manslaughter if anybody wants to take the trouble, which they don't. It seems like half the city is trying to cover it all up, which is fine by me. But Mrs. Mulray, I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it. And I still think that you're hiding something.
In 1937, Jeets drove a black 1935 Ford V8 Deluxe. The closest I could get was one of its offspring, a 1940 Ford V8 sedan, which I found abandoned at an Alico garage near the crossing of Traction Avenue and 3rd Street. Slipping behind the wheel, the first thing I wanted to do was find water. Water was a raison d'etre of Jeets' case 10 years ago. For Nicholas Christopher, it is the city's lifeblood. Everything started from it, a primal amenity that was being put on the black market. This car would be my dowsing rod. Heading east, I eventually crossed the Los Angeles River along 4th Street, held above this ribbon of dark blue. At the other side, I pulled over and found a drainage pipe with brown, muddy water floating out of it like sepia. I waded in up to my waist, refreshed by its appearance. There were some barrels left abandoned by the side. Cars flew by. It was getting late. Chinatown I knew was north of here and not too far from the river. As the sun hit the horizon, I drove down to the river's edge, a long, wide valley of concrete with a surprisingly low water level that I could drive through. Driving against this slow current, I ploughed through the river, following it north, as L.A.'s nightlife began to wake up. I saw the lights on the bridge begin to twinkle, and then I hit a dead end. A huge fence was blocking my path. I crossed the river to the west side, the side I knew Chinatown to be on, and cut across some train tracks and through an industrial area, arriving at the nearby Union Station in the middle of the night. This station first opened its doors 8 years ago, 2 years after Jeets' love interest, Evelyn Mulray, met her end in Chinatown. Known as the last of the great railway stations, it will play backdrop to a number of films, including Blade Runner, Pearl Harbor, and Speed. From here I headed north for a bit, arriving at the fortified United States Post Office Terminal Annex built the year of Chinatown. It still being dark, I stayed on north until my route became blocked again, this time by a Pacific Electric train of all things, that had just decided to park itself. I snaked away, finding 2 more roadblocks. Someone did not want me to leave L.A.
All taken care of. So, Mr. Kris, either you bring the water to L.A., or you bring L.A. to the water.
How are you going to do that?
By incorporating the valley into the city. Simple as that.
How much you worth?
I've no idea. How much do you want?
No, I just want to know what you're worth. Over 10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future.
Panicking, I fled south, finding Union Station again. I jumped out of the car and ran in looking for a place to hide from Norman Cross, Evelyn's father, and a powerful man who was behind the conspiracy of its water. At a newsstand I found a golden film reel entitled Pick Up on South Street, and looking at the clock I noticed it was 8:30. Time was going very quickly. The hands literally flew around her face. After running along some of the platforms, I calmed down, and returning to my car, drove southeast past Cavernous Bar and a load of huge oil drills. The buildings here all had water towers, filtering this precious liquid down to its occupants. I ended up doubling back on myself, arriving at El Pueblo de Los Angeles, the city's historic centre, through Spanish, Mexican and American occupation from 1781 onwards. A plaque tacked to it reads, "On September the 4th, 1781, 11 families of pobladores, 44 persons including children, arrived at this place from the Gulf of California to establish a pueblo which was to become the city of Los Angeles. This colonization, ordered by King Carlos III, was carried out under the direction of Governor Felipe de Neve. After this I suddenly got sidetracked, having to break up a disturbance on Olvera Street between a woman and her vengeful ex. I gave the ex an incentive to back away by shooting him several times in the chest, and in the skirmish I lost my car. Running along the street, I managed to find an identical model parked outside a dilapidated yellow wooden house. They had a bicycle, so it's not as if I left them empty-handed. As night fell again, I headed north, again returning to the United States Post Office. I was going in circles. Chinatown could be anywhere. Then I found it. A giant courtyard of red and gold, built like a temple. I parked at an entrance, flanked by 2 stone lions, and got out of the car and entered Chinatown. In front of me a small stage had been erected with a screen. To the right a small Zen-like garden with a yin and yang symbol inscribed into its centre. The whole place seemed abandoned as I walked past shops with ceremonial masks, pottery, drums and gongs in their windows. I spent the entire night walking around Chinatown and watching the sun rise on the Golden Dragon Tea House, Hong Kong Art Goods, the Golden Imports Company, an empty market stall with a sign saying that they sold corn on the cob for 15 cents. This is not the first Chinatown that L.A. has had, the first demolished to make way for Union Station, probably why I couldn't avoid it. This one was built in 1938, a year after Jeet's tragedy, designed by film set designers to create a miniature Hollywoodized theme park to draw in tourists. The emptiness Jeets felt in Chinatown was here palpable as I sat on a bench and watched the sun set. I felt hollow. This hollowness was all the more present when I found out later that the film's Chinatown was actually filmed in Spring Street, further down the road.
Go home, Jake.
I'm doing you a favor. Come on, Jake.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
It started with a cup of coffee.
me.
So cooperate, Miss Bracken. Why was Susan Leffert to the Night Owl?
I don't know. I never heard of the Night Owl till today.
How did she meet Patchett?
Pierce meets people. Sue came on a bus with dreams of Hollywood, and this is how they turned out.
In 6 years' time, one of the cars Bud White drives will be that of a 1951 Chevrolet Fleetline Deluxe. Obviously I couldn't get that here in 1947, but I did manage to find an ancestor of it in the form of a two-door Chevrolet released just this year. Top speed, 85 miles per hour. Parked some distance away from Chinatown in Hollywood, I set off from Seward and Sunset Boulevard in the evening, in search for the Night Owl coffee shop, scene of the shooting that saw the demise of Bud's partner. Bud White has a bit of a temper, and when I drove I hardly took my foot off the accelerator, heading southwest. My first port of call was the American League Stadium, one of the first major boxing stadiums in L.A., the perfect place for a fighter like Bud to visit. In 12 years' time it will close and be replaced by a bowling alley. After driving quite fast and aggressively around some suburbs, I totaled my car at Clinton and Madison after crashing into a tailor's. It wasn't until dawn that I found my replacement and drove southwards along some long sweeping roads, not caring for who or what I may hit. At about midday I discovered the film set to D.W. Griffith's 3.5-hour epic silent film, Intolerance, depicting an interpretation of the city of Babylon. Strangely, the set was dismantled in 1919 and was located 5 miles north of here. This L.A. didn't make any sense.
Rollo Tomasi's the reason I became a cop. I wanted to catch the guys who thought they could get away with it. It was supposed to be about justice. Then somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that.
Having begun in Hollywood where films are conceived, I now headed towards Broadway where films are born. I drove past the Olympic Theatre, which was showing Howard Hawks' 1946 neo-noire film, The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Newsreel was showing Out of the Past, a film noir from 1947, directed by Jacques Tourneur. The Rialto, meanwhile, was showing Detour, completing the spell of film noirs that seem to be popular in LA at the moment. This one was directed by Martin Goldsmith and starred Tom Neal and Anne Savage. Reading these signs, I obviously wasn't watching the road and had to find my third car at 9th and Olive. Heading north, I came across the striking site of the LA Public Library. It was built in 1926 and is the third largest in America. Designed by architect Bertram Grosvenor Goodhue, it has a mixture of ancient Egyptian and Mediterranean revival architecture, with a hand holding a torch, representing the light of learning at the apex. It is also the place where the opening to Ghostbusters will be filmed. Heading back towards Broadway, I found that Warner Brothers Theatre was showing The Lady from Shanghai, a film noir directed by Orson Welles that had been recently released. As it started to get dark, I found myself following the matrix of cables above that linked the tram lines across the city, like arteries for a vast body. I needed to find its heart though, as the Night Owl coffee shop is next to the Pacific Electric Station, where all of these trams go. Past the Gates Hotel I drove, ending up back at the library again, before heading through a tunnel. The town theatre is showing Edward Dmytrik's film noir, Crossfire, the first B movie to receive a nomination for Best Picture from the Academy Awards. Again, the LA Public Library. I seem to be circling it. I switched to my fourth car between Broadway and Olive, this time a convertible, heading past the familiar Central Police Station. After visiting El Pueblo de Los Angeles, I was now heading in the wrong direction, towards Chinatown. My fifth car, another convertible, at First and Main. Next, another intimidating building, that of City Hall, built in 1928 and now the tallest building in Los Angeles. It's also on my police badge. War of the Worlds will be filmed here, as well as part of GTA San Andreas. Bud White will threaten to drop District Attorney Ellis Lowe from here in 6 years' time. My sixth car from outside a jewellery store. I headed west as night fell, driving past the Good Samaritan Hospital. Presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy will die there in 21 years' time. The RKO Theatre is showing Odd Man Out, another film noir, this one starring James Mason. I found my seventh car between Broadway and Los Angeles Street, and after speeding through a tunnel, I find City Hall exactly where I left it. As the sun rose again, I found myself back at the RKO Theatre, frustrated that I can't find this stupid coffee shop. Then I see it.
Have you a valediction, boyo?
Rollo. Tomasi.
The Pacific Electric Station opened back in 1905 and is the centre for all of the Pacific Railway trams that I have been weaving in and out of on my drift. Opposite lies the All-American bus lines, but in 6 years' time it will be the Night Owl coffee shop. Standing here felt a little weird, a part of history that I cannot change. Across the street from it though, I did find a future echo of it in a record store. At the old record shop, a sign informs me that they have all the old favourites, Denny Kyle, Eddie Wason. A particular record caught my eye though. It was the first album by Greg Karukas, The Night Owl Blues. Did I bring Jake and Bud back? Of course not, but they're around here somewhere. Like me, they haunt this city, bleeding through its history. Place defines us, and we define it. To many they will be trapped in a film or a novel, a fixed frame that holds them prisoner, a film cell and an actual cell. Jack Nicholson and Russell Crowe have aged, but Jake Jeets and Bud White always remain. Yet their LA is just as much mine as Cole Phelps, and for a moment it was the one thing that linked us all. By exploring it as they did, I felt like I was tunnelling underneath their cells, allowing them to leak out into mine, to possess me as a gamer, to feel their loss and anger, to revisit places where destinies were changed and will be changed. Such an escape from one cell, though, ultimately takes him into another. It will always be 1947 here in L.A. noir. But by telling you my tale, I let these two men and their stories seep elsewhere via the internet, through your headphones, into your ears, and out into wherever you are now, like a cup of spilt coffee flowing into a river. Well, that brings me to the end of my InRetroSpect episode. Thanks for listening. Please check out InRetroSpectPodcast.com for a host of shows that play with perspectives of gaming. Show us your appreciation by rating us on iTunes and the Zune Marketplace. We can also be found on Twitter at InRetroSpect. Anyways, I've been Kris Darby, and this has been another episode of InRetroSpect. Bye.
Next week on InRetroSpect, Dan saddles up and ventures into the Wild West with Red Dead Redemption.
The camera pans across a river as a steamboat moors at its dock and a group of eager passengers wait to disembark. We follow an unnamed protagonist as he is escorted from the boat through the town of Blackwater and placed on a train. We see as the train slices through the landscape and watch closely as the man surveys the passing environment. This is how Red Dead Redemption begins. At this point, mystery surrounds the protagonist of John Marston, but more importantly, it is here that the second protagonist of this game is introduced: the landscape.